Welcome back, everybody. Jenny Larios, I love that music. Definitely. Sacramento's in the house, Inglewood's in the house. We are loving California today. You know, from microtransit to critical policy issues, autonomous vehicles, aviation and goods movement, today's summit has ignited necessary discussions to help empower each of us to make California the transportation center of excellence. Thank you again to today's titanium sponsor, Moffitt & Nichol. We would also like to thank this afternoon's closing session sponsors, Kimley Horn and Parsons, for making this program session possible. Let's go ahead and give them all a round of applause. We'd also like to thank all of our elected officials who came here today. Please let's give them a round of applause. You know, for our final program today, I am excited to hear how our transportation, port, and utility leaders have their sights set on the 2035 air quality mandates and what they are doing to meet this challenge here in Southern California. Leading this all-star panel this afternoon is an amazing individual from Moffitt & Nichol, our underwriting titanium sponsor. With a career spanning 38 years in both the private and public sector, including 22 years at the Port of Long Beach, Mr. Richard Steinke is a trusted advisor to the transportation industry. While at the Port of Long Beach, he implemented the Green Port Policy and worked extensively on the extremely successful Clean Trucks program. He is the perfect moderator for our distinguished closing session panel that will discuss the path to California's 2035 clean air mandate. Please help me welcome to the podium, Mr. Steinke.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this final session. And thank you, Doug. I want to refer everyone to our program to learn more about our panelists today. But right now, it's my pleasure to welcome them to the stage for this discussion. Hassan Ikrada, Executive Director of SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments. Chris Thompson, Vice President, Southern California Edison. George Minter, Regional Vice President, Southern California Gas. Darrell Johnson, CEO of the Orange County Transportation Authority. Phil Washington, the CEO of the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Dwayne Carnegie, Deputy Executive Director for the Port of Long Beach. and Gene Soroka, Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement. If I could please have your attention. Distinguished panelists, if you could please turn your attention to the screen for this very important notification.
wonderful, insightful things you do every single day. What
We wish you all the best in San Diego. Thank you for your incredible service. Okay, now let's get Richard and this panel back to business.
Well, thank you very much. And Hassan, again, my congratulations, as well as the rest of the panel's congratulations to you as you move forward. Well, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, I think we've heard from a great brain trust today, a lot of great perspectives. The mayor's speech at lunch was very, very inspirational about where this area is going. And we know we need to move forward, and these transportation leaders have represented that and have led that effort. This final panel will focus a little bit on where we're headed in the future with respect to our clean air mandate, and whether or not the trade and economic growth will hit a tipping point at some point as we move forward between now and 2035. So our first question is for Dwayne Carnegie. Dwayne, the Clean Air Action Plan established by the two ports have established very aggressive goals to set zero emissions. What do you foresee as the biggest challenge to achieving these goals?
Well, Dick, the goals of the Clean Air Action Plan are zero emissions for cargo handling equipment in 2030 and zero emissions in the drayage fleet of trucks by 2035. We recognize that these are very ambitious goals, but we believe they're necessary to get to where we need to be. We believe we're already on the path to achieve them. 13% of all of the terminal equipment in the Port of Long Beach is already zero emissions, most of that at Long Beach Container Terminal. We're also moving forward with developing and demonstrating traditionally operated terminal equipment, zero emissions in real world service to test it out, see how it works, see what the duty cycles that it will support. We've secured significant grant funding and have several demonstration projects, both ports, testing equipment in real world applications so that we can get a handle on how it works, how many pieces of equipment you have to have, what sort of infrastructure do you need to support that. On the trucking side, Daimler, Toyota, Tesla, among many that are working on zero emissions trucking fleets, and those early indications are very, very positive. We're optimistic that the technology will be there in that ambitious cycle. Infrastructure availability will also be a challenge. Both ports, just because of geography, are at the end of the electrical distribution network, and to go all electric in terminals or to get close to that requires considerable investment in electrical infrastructure to maintain the resiliency and reliability that you need to operate marine terminals. Another challenge in all of this will be financing. It'll require considerable investment on the private sector, but we're also looking for funding support at the state level from VW settlement funds and cap and trade and other federal and state programs to help with that transition. But it is a challenge. We're committed to every 3 years doing a technology assessment to try to determine where the challenges lie and what resources would need to be deployed to overcome those challenges.
Thanks, Dwayne. Gene, we'll kind of follow up with you, talking a little bit more about the dynamics at the port and giving the presumed tremendous costs that will need to be borne directly by the industry and the ports, as Dwayne alluded to. Having been an executive in the shipping line and negotiated contracts with importers and exporters, do you think the shippers will divert cargo out of California in direct response to these impending logistics cost increases and the emission reduction rules and mandates set by the state and the California Resources Board?
That's always a concern. The need to remain competitive at a high level is what drives decision-making from the folks that you just mentioned, Dick. They've got choices. They've shown that through four corner strategies, port diversification strategies, and very nimble supply chains, cargo can move anywhere. And as other ports gather steam, momentum, and investment, you've seen that the level of competition has risen to new heights. And that's also a combination with how we do our job on the operational side, where we're at when it comes to the fluidity of the supply chain and what we're doing from an optimization standpoint. Attempting to digitize the supply chain, I think, separates us from anywhere else in the United States and most parts around the world for that matter. So it's a very complicated equation, from the geographical proximity we have to our major market in Asia, which is best in class, to the ability to manage and harness the power of all of these supply chain nodes coming together at the confluence of the port. So I don't think just singling out one aspect of that vast port equation is enough to say, are you going to be good or not, or are folks going to shy away from you or not? It's that entire package where we have to have a laser-like precision in every aspect of what we do: community, environment, the sheer movement of cargo, and then where we get off a beaten path and trying to really raise the bar in an area that we're known for worldwide. And we've done some things to the point where this being the third iteration of our Clean Air Action Plan makes us a known commodity around the world, but also one that has worked in such a collaborative fashion. As Dwayne alluded to, we want to be a market maker. So it's not just drawing a line out in some distant future and saying this is the way it must be, but how do we work together to get there? And that's spending a lot of time with the original equipment manufacturers and their tiered suppliers. The concept of a market maker is one that is quite fascinating to me, because even the largest complex in the country, from a port perspective, can't dictate to original equipment manufacturers how to get product commercially available and into the marketplace fast enough. As an example, with heavy-duty trucks, we represent here in Southern California in the port's drayage industry less than 2 weeks' worth of annual production in the United States for these big trucks that haul the containers. And we buy our trucks about once every 13 years. So to turn over a manufacturing line that costs about $2 million an hour to produce these trucks and say, here's how we're going to do it for about 10 days worth of production, and we'll come back and see you in a decade and a half, that doesn't go over too well. So we've got to become a better customer, and that's stringing together folks with common interests, people who can buy the same products and get them out into a commercialized stage faster. Offering to be a test lab with a combined 15,000 acres of property and get real-time examples of how well or how much improvement you may need with a particular type of equipment is also very enticing to a lot of those folks. And many of those ship their cargo through our ports. So there's a relationship that goes across a lot of boundaries and helps us get into conversations with people and bring partnerships together like no other port complex can. So I continue to be encouraged, but man, we've got a lot of work to do, and the ability to maintain our competitiveness through all these other avenues, optimization, digitization, getting out in the leadership perspective when it comes to 5G, census tract spectrum, LTE private networks, and being able to manage in a base case of IoT really well before anybody else does, I think is going to drive that, because not only does this type of equipment that has really only been in nascent stages going to be in a position to help us, but it's the fluidity of cargo that will. Less touches to a container mean less emissions that go airborne. The ability to push this through from a data harvesting standpoint and be able to know exactly what moves we're going to be able to make in a predictive and prescriptive style have shown that we can reduce emissions by double-digit counts per container right now, just applying some of this science. So again, it's how we project ourselves, what we're trying to do to bring coalitions together, and always trying to stay a step ahead of the competition and what we deliver to our customers.
Thanks, Gene. Hassan, kind of keeping with the goods movement theme, we know that's an important growth engine in the region. We heard some of the numbers earlier today, but it's also a major source of air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Is it possible to balance the seemingly conflicting objectives, and how?
The simple answer is yes. You hear this morning that goods movement is responsible for 1/3 of the jobs in California. In our region, about $290 billion worth of gross domestic product was moved in 2015. At the same time, 40% of nitrogen dioxide comes from goods movement sources. And the question is logical: can we continue to rely on this economic growth, which is so vital in California and Southern California, and at the same time meet our global warming and emission requirements? And the reason I said the answer is yes, if you take history, recent history between 1990 and 2015, our gross product grew by 70%. Our jobs grew by about 25%. And the good news is our emissions were reduced by 30 to 70%. So we were able to do it at least between 1990 and 2015. And I believe we can do it at a bigger scale moving forward, simply because innovation and technology is a part of everything we do today. You know, if you live in the Skag region, there's a lot of exciting things happening. We have two ports here that are the largest in the US, the fourth largest in the world. So one of 3 or 4 that have deep waters. We created more high-tech jobs in the LA area the last 2 years than anywhere in the country. We have the voters in LA County and Phil Washington and his team working hard to provide the state-of-the-art transportation system. If you think of all of that, we must deal with the challenges and deploy technology to deal with them. And we must always go to the highest job generator, which is goods movement. And final point, with all the good stuff that's happening, 17% of our kids in the Skag region live in poverty. This is a very shameful statistics for a great nation, a great state, a great region. And to lift people out of poverty, we need to focus in this sector that provide upward mobility for a lot of our workers. So I go back to the answer. Yes, we can meet the challenge. We need to deploy more technology and continue investing in infrastructure.
Thank you, Hassan. Phil, we're going to move a little bit from goods to people. And you might want to share with us how you believe that Metro will plan to meet California's 2035 clean air mandate, and what has Metro done thus far, and what are you planning to do in the future?
Yes, thank you, Dick. We're doing quite a number of things to meet that mandate in 2035, and even now, the electrification of our fleet in terms of planning to electrify our entire fleet of 2,200 buses by 2030, that is a huge effort that we're making right now. We have a plan to do that. We're in the process of first electrifying the fleet for the Orange Line. We have an Orange Line bus rapid transit right-of-way, and so that will be sort of the first line that we do to electrify the fleet on that particular BRT line. But I would also point to the building that we're doing, the capital construction that we're doing. We're the first agency in the country to adopt what's called a green construction policy that says we will look at ways to make sure that what we're building has the climate in mind, sustainability in mind, and also leaning on the private sector to help us with sort of the life cycle of an asset. Sometimes when you think about the life cycle of an asset, whether it be a rail line or a bus rapid transit line or highway improvements, you might have to spend a little bit more upfront to make sure that that asset is sustainable and will last a long time. It's just like your house. I mean, you wouldn't pick the cheapest material to build your house. You would pick material that's going to be sustainable and that's going to last the longest. And so we're doing all those things right now. The electrification of our fleet is an incredible effort because it's not just saying that you will have some chargers here and there. It's actually retraining your whole workforce to maintain that fleet and all those things. And the last thing I would say is this question of getting people ready to maintain the new technology that we're building. And so we have taken and looked at this thing in really a long-term effort to make sure that the workforce is ready, starting as early as grades 9 through 12 with the creation of a transportation school in South LA, and looking at the curriculum that we've already put together to make sure that new technology is part of the curriculum for this school, teaching young people, and by the way, focusing on the foster care system and at-risk kids for this school, but the curriculum, we're including in that all forms of new technology, and we don't even know what that is because new technology will change in the next 2 to 5 years, maybe 2 years, but making sure that these young people are at the forefront, learning design build, learning design bid build, learning public-private partnerships, understanding the design of systems using new technology. So this is very, very important to us. There's one thing to talk about the asset, the bus, the rail car, all those things. It's quite another thing to talk about getting young people ready to maintain those new assets, whether it be, and I'm talking all transportation, I'm talking about aviation, the ports, all of those things in my mind is transportation infrastructure, making sure that the human capital is ready to maintain that equipment.
Thank you, Phil. Darrell, Governor Brown extended the state's commitment to the cap and trade program through 2030, which will provide resources to help meet SB 375's 2030 clean air mandate. What is your vision at OCTA for using this funding to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Orange County?
Thanks for the question there. I think a couple things. One is, I find that Phil and I, you and I sat on another panel, we talked about capital funding is available to about 2021, but the cap and trade funding is available to 2030, so we need to, or 2035, so we need to sort of match these things up, right? But I think it points out the dichotomy between the capital side and some other things. But we clearly see it as helping us meet the mandates, and just a couple of quick things that we've done. We worked to really expand transit access to college students, in particular Santa Ana Community College. It's the largest community college in Orange County, and we worked with the student body there. Last summer, we launched a student pass program 40,000 individual students now have free ride access to the transit system in Orange County, and we've recorded 900,000 boardings in the last 13 months. So we're pretty excited about that. We couldn't have done that program without the cap and trade, and most of those students were driving in some way, shape, or form to the campus there. We're starting a new bus service, an express bus service on Beach Boulevard. It's a state highway, but it functions as a local arterial. And this idea of more faster trip times in a key corridor, that's allowing us to expand transit there. And then something I think you probably think about, Phil, and I think about, which is we're bypassing people that have a bicycle that can't get on the bus because the bike racks are already full. So we're adding 3-position bike racks to the front of the buses. And these are little things, but they're driving transit use, which is bringing down VMT and other things there. We also sponsored a bill this year. The governor signed it. It was, in fact, Senator Bell was here earlier, 1119. He sponsored it for us. It changed and waived and made more flexible the definition of disadvantaged communities, because this idea that if you live in a disadvantaged community but you're going to school in a non-disadvantaged community, that you can't use the cap and trade funding to go from your community to your school. We thought that didn't make a whole lot of sense, and that was signed recently by the governor. That's going to allow us to expand that community college pass program to some other schools, and we're hoping for similar success there. And then I would say, as we think about the future, everything that we think today is changing, this idea of technology, what it's going to be. And we started on Monday, we introduced a flex service, or a microtransit service called OC Flex. We started it in Huntington Beach on Monday, starts tomorrow in South Orange County in the community of Mission Viejo and others. And that is sort of, we see more opportunities for things like that to reduce those single occupant vehicle trips, sort of an average occupancy increasing, shared rides. But I think also more importantly is Governing Magazine recently did some detailed analysis on the 2017 census, and for the first time ever, more people are telecommuting than taking transit to work. So this idea, if you can eliminate the trip entirely, maybe we can take another angle there, and traditional transportation funding doesn't really allow us to incentivize or do anything with telecommuting, and I think we need to have a little bit more flexibility thinking about how our future workforce thinks about work, so we're matching their needs as opposed to just building more roads, running more buses, running more trains. We need to think about what the workforce needs and match those services to it. So that's what we think about cap and trade, and I think all of those types of things are helping us get to that 2035 mandate.
Thank you, Darrell. George, in Southern California, most of the transit agencies have moved from diesel to natural gas to power their fleets and to reduce air pollutants. But are we now in a time when advocates argue to keep it in the ground and stop using fossil fuels altogether? And what is the role of natural gas in the transportation sector in the future as you see it, Southern California Gas?
Thank you. SoCal Gas is a very large energy provider. Most all of you use us every day to heat your home or your water or cook your food. And ironically, actually, our biggest customers are the electric generators who use gas to generate electricity. And then our next biggest customers are the oil companies who use it to power their refining operations to produce diesel. And so all of those produce emissions. And that's the challenge that we have to address the topic that we're talking about today, which is about clean air and also about addressing emissions associated with climate change. And it's important, I think, to talk about emissions, and that's what we started with in this discussion, and it was nice to hear the ports talk about focusing on emissions and technology to reduce emissions so we can meet the emission requirements of federal law for clean air and also state law for climate change. I'm a little concerned that in the transit sector, we've gotten away from talking about emissions, and we're just talking about we want this kind of technology, and there's mandates for just electric only. And there's a lot of opportunity for emission reductions from switching from dirty fuels to clean fuels. And for 20 years, we worked with MTA and the other transit agencies to go from diesel to natural gas, really driving down emissions. And at the same time, we've worked with engine manufacturers to develop an engine that's 90% cleaner than today's engine. And actually, the transit agencies are starting to buy that engine. And that engine approaches the emissions associated with using electricity. People talk about zero emission, but electric buses do have emissions associated with generating electricity. And there are other alternatives to zero emission technology, not just electricity, but hydrogen fuel cell. The fuel cell is an electric producer, and it drives a motor, so it's an electric-driven bus, but it's provided fuel through hydrogen. And hydrogen producers are, again, among our biggest customers. 99% of the hydrogen that's used in the marketplace today comes from natural gas. So there will continue to be a role for natural gas for generating electricity, producing fuels, including hydrogen fuels, clean fuels. But natural gas itself is also looking at becoming more renewable. Most of us talk about electricity, and we want solar, and we want wind, and we want renewable electricity. But the reality is there's a lot of sources of renewable gas. We need to think about electricity and gas when we think about our renewable energy future. And so today, actually, 60% of the gas that's delivered to MTA, to Metro, is now renewable, which is more renewable than electricity is today. In fact, electricity won't be 60% renewable until 2030. That's the requirement of law, but we're already there today. So we would say to the transit agencies and to the ARB making the transit rules that we really should focus on emissions. We ought to let technologies compete to achieve the emission reductions we need. And I think in time we'll see that that will make sense. I think AC Transit is making a very strong case for hydrogen fuel cell buses being superior for their service territory than electric driven buses. I think we'll see electric buses make sense where there's right-of-way ownership so we can address the charging issues. I think you'll see CNG buses with 90% lower emitting engines and running on renewable gas be the mainstay for many, many years to come, clearly a decade to come. And I think the new technology that's coming into the market is the hydrogen fuel cell. And there's more and more discussion, and the major auto and truck manufacturers and bus operators are looking at the hydrogen fuel cell. So then the challenge is, where does the hydrogen come from? The Keep It in the Ground advocates would like that hydrogen to be green hydrogen. And we think that's the direction we need to go. And so our focus really is on reducing emissions, on making our fuel more renewable, and looking at ways that hydrogen can be integrated with our own gas delivery system so we can drive emissions down even more. And so we see that happening over in the trucking sector for ports and as well as the transit sector. One thing that I wanted to mention about ports, which wasn't brought up, is there's a strong interest worldwide in liquefied natural gas being the new fuel for the marine sector. And that's already happening in the Pacific trade. It's happening in the Caribbean trade. Most of the river trade in Europe is all LNG. So the marine sector has primarily been fueled by bunker fuel, which is a very, very dirty fuel, much dirtier than diesel. And what we're now seeing is the marine sector demanding replacement of bunker fuel with natural gas. So we'll see that in Long Beach and Los Angeles as well in the near future.
Thank you, George. And I'm sure that Gene and Dwayne can weigh into some of the IMO mandates that are coming down the pike that probably have their shipping lines and shippers a little nervous at this point as to how they're going to adapt to the new rules. Chris, let's talk a little bit about Southern California Edison and your role and maybe your perspective on clean fuel sources that we need to meet in order to get there by 2035.
Yeah, thanks. So we're already a lot of the way there. Southern California Edison's electric generation mix, the electricity that we supply to customers, is 46% emissions-free today. As was mentioned, under current state law, SB 100, which was recently enacted, that's going to go to 60% renewable and with a target of 100% emissions-free by 2045. Those two things get conflated, sometimes renewable and emissions-free, but we'll be at a 60% renewable standard in 2030 and 100% emissions-free target in 2045. Southern California Edison has based its whole corporate strategy around delivering clean fuel for our end users. So we put together a white paper about a year ago and put it out with what at the time were very aggressive targets. We called for up to 80% of the electric generation to be emissions free. That's already been superseded by SB 100, which is now targeting 100%. We called for 7 million electric vehicles on the roads of California to address the roughly 40% of greenhouse gas emissions that come from the transportation sector. So that would be passenger vehicles and then up to 200,000 transit and freight movement vehicles. The governor's called for 5 million, so we're still a little bit ahead of the state in what we're advocating for. But I also would expect that the next governor will really aggressively push in further electrification of the transportation sector. So the clean fuel is there to fuel the future of transportation, be it passenger movement, goods movement across our state and across our region. And so what we're focused on is how do we deliver cleaner and cleaner energy to our end users? And then, as you heard from some of the end users who were here, Metro, the ports, and others, how do we integrate those clean fuels into their planning cycles, into the long life cycles of their capital assets, be they buses or rail vehicles or gantry cranes and drayage trucks? Those are very long-lived assets. So there's a long planning cycle that has to go into that. So we've got a number of pilot projects in flight with those end users to demonstrate that these things are workable, working out the kinks, and then investing in the technology. The state has a strong interest in reduction of both criteria pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions, and so we have invested through authorities granted by the Public Utilities Commission hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're proposing hundreds of millions more to invest in end user charging infrastructure, be it for transits, Foothill Transit, LA Metro, Antelope Valley Transit, and others who are really leading the way in this area, as well as at the port and residential and workplace charging for light duty vehicles.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Next one, Hassan, I'll pose this to you. As a regional agency in Southern California, what do you think your major initiatives are in the role to fulfill the clean air mandates? How do you work with your many constituencies that you have and the member agencies on this issue?
Thank you. First of all, we do have a mandate from the federal government, and the Clean Air Act said that we need, as a region, to meet the Clean Air Act requirement of 1991. And we have a state mandate that requires us to meet the global warming greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2035. And both of those mandates, people ask me, well, do you believe in global warming? And my answer is, my pay scale is much less than qualify me to answer that question, but the law of the land said we need to meet these requirements. We try with my colleagues at the transportation agency, the 6 transportation commissions, very hard to balance the world of building for the future, but make sure whatever we're building, we're meeting these goals and actually exceeding them in some cases. We work very hard at SCAG with our 191 cities in Southern California to incentivize them to do land use differently. Obviously, we are not in charge of land use, neither the transportation agencies, but we can bribe the cities to do what we think the right land use to match all these investments. And some cities are taking that bribe proudly and doing it this way. So I believe investing in transportation without tackling the land use issue is going to be a challenge in the future. And I believe the more we work together to make sure our transportation investment meets the land use planning, that's going to help us meeting a requirement. The second issue is, we talked about it earlier. Darrell mentioned that there's more people today telecommuting, working from home, than riding the public transportation. That's, for the first time in history, that has achieved. And that tells me that the changes we've been talking about for the last 30 years are taking hold. So Metro is building a great transportation system for LA County, so are the 5 other county commission. Now we need to factor in building this system, this new trend. There is this generation called the millennial generation, which is the largest right now in the US. I'm an expert in them. I have 2 at home, and I can tell you. But that generation, I think, look at transportation and housing differently. That's going to help us coordinating the land use and transportation. Obviously, we can't fit all of them in downtown Los Angeles. We're going to have to figure out how the suburbs is going to be the future downtown Los Angeles. So we're doing all of these things, hoping that the future is brighter, but the future also, whether you believe in global warming or not, the future is going to make us be able to sustain ourselves environmentally and financially. And finally, I'm really surprised that this didn't get a lot of coverage. I mean, there was big report, United Nations report that says if we don't do something in the next 10 years, again, I'm not an expert in global warming, but let us assume there is some truth to that. We all have an obligation to start thinking differently about the world. But we're trying to do that, and together SCAG and the County Transportation Commissions has been taking this seriously. We met the requirement, both federal and state, and we're going to meet the next one also. The next one will be more challenges, but we're going to try to meet it again.
Thanks, Hassan. Phil was giving me some sign language over here, and I couldn't see the sign because the spot was right on. We have now less than 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think that was the sign that came.
Okay, all right, well.
The Sandman came over.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to see from this angle.
tough, yeah.
Well, I have a number of additional questions, but I'm going to leave the panelists with one, and each of you can answer it. You're all transportation leaders in your respective areas. You've got significant challenges on a daily basis. And I'm just going to go down the line here. Gene, what keeps you up at night? Besides your favorite movie?
It's bringing everything together. And Dick, you sat in a chair like mine for a long time. And it's really trying to bring all these stakeholders, some who have diverging interests, those that have competing interests, and some that just like to hold their information close to the vest. So we found, not only in this job and in others all around the world, that working through a collaborative environment means a lot. We do have certain convening powers, all of us here on this panel, to bring stakeholders to the table to talk about the real tough issues. Right now in our business, in our little patch, the trade war, trade debate, trade tariff issue is probably one of the bigger ones and something that's out of our control. Right now it's our estimation that about 25% of all of our cargo will be impacted by the tariffs. And that simply means three things could happen. Higher prices for you and me at the store, which are already happening. Costs increase for the companies that are managing all of these goods, which means margin cuts, potential disruption to jobs creation, and other impediments as we move forward. And then lastly, and probably important to us is how we see the future, are shifting trade patterns. And a fact that an industry that is not always known for being nimble will have to adjust to these trade patterns. There are other forces in the bilateral discussions that are taking place that may have a China variable in the equation, whether you're talking to Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, et cetera. And so how we respond to that as a network is going to be very important. We still have 20 million folks here that eat, drink, go to the store, buy stuff, grow stuff, and have to move it out. We've got the greatest gateway to move cargo to other people in the country that want it, and we still reach all 435 congressional districts in our nation with the goods that traverse our port. But we've got to be smart about how we do it, and sometimes we have to overcome some of these impediments that have nothing to do with us here in Southern California.
Right. Thanks, Gene. Dwayne, same question. With the exception of your next-door neighbor, what's your greatest concern and fear?
Well, we both work in a very dynamic environment. It's decentralized, but it's evolving very, very rapidly, changing in ways with industry consolidation, all the changes that Gene alluded to. But we're public sector port authorities, and our planning horizons are longer than the change cycle. So the big challenge to me as a port is how do we stay ahead of that? How do we build just in time to meet the demands and serve the customers, but also fulfill our obligations to our local communities. We're both municipal port authorities, so we want to be good neighbors, we want to be good citizens, we want to create the jobs and opportunities. How do we stay ahead of that curve when the industry is changing? Ships are getting larger much faster than anyone thought. You probably went to the first time an 8,000 TEU vessel. Both ports have been visited by 18,000 TEU vessels with bigger ships on the way. So how do we get our facilities modified, changed? How do we get the infrastructure in place to accommodate an industry that's changing every day?
Thanks, Dwayne. An interesting comment, especially in view of the fact what Daryl and Phil were talking about on the last panel about planning cycles and funding cycles and how they do not coordinate and how it makes some real vexing challenges for agencies like yours. Phil, challenge, what keeps you up at night?
Well, nothing keeps me up at night, actually. It doesn't. I mean, I sleep like a baby. But I would reflect on a couple of things. One is, in an agency like Metro, we carry 1.3, 1.4 million people a day. And so that is a lot of automobiles off the road. I mean, when you start thinking about 1.3, 1.4 million people a day that's on our system and not driving their car all the way to work, I think that's a huge piece. But I think we need to look at the impacts of our zero emission bus fleet. I talked a little bit about some of the impacts before, the workforce piece, the training piece, making sure that we have folks that are qualified to maintain this zero emission fleet and this 2035 deadline or mandate that's coming upon us. We think it's a long way off. It's actually not that far away. And then the other thing I think about, and I hear George, and he's right, talking about we should concentrate on emissions. I love being on a panel with George because every now and then we get to argue a little bit, George and I. But I still have this mandate from my board to go all electric with my fleet, and that probably will not change.
Scoot back here a moment.
Yeah. But lastly, I would say, and this gets to what Hassan was saying, that report that said we have 10 years, 10 years, that's pretty scary, actually. I will say this, I want to be in charge of transportation infrastructure in the next world. You know what I mean? If we only have 10 years to go. If we only have 10 years to go, I want to have something to do with transportation in the great beyond, if you will. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Daryl.
Sort of hard to follow that, Phil. Maybe it's just the transportation guys, but I sleep pretty well at night too. But my mind is racing throughout the day when I am awake. I was thinking about your question, and I got into the business 27 or 28 years ago because I wanted to make a difference in people's daily lives. And I want to keep track of that, and I want to keep that in focus because we can talk about all the rules and the regulations, but what we're trying to do is make a difference in people's lives. So when I think about what keeps me up at night, I want to make sure that we're keeping the commitment to our community and to our cities about what they expect from us as stewards of public trust. And I think that's really important because if we start getting distracted about what our job is, then I think we lose their confidence and their trust. And I think that's why we pass local sales tax measures. That's why we deliver on the promises. So that keeps me up at night a lot there. I also think about our industry, and by that I mean our career development and our workforce. I'm very worried that we're not attracting young people to our business, whether it's the technical side or the strategic side or the planning side, because we need to pass that information on. And I want people to be excited about our business, not because they want to build a bridge or because they want to build a road or because they want to see a fancy bus or a train. I don't care about any of those things, frankly, and I don't want our future generation to care about those things. What they need to care about is how do we have the effective movement of people. And maybe the best movement of people is telecommuting. Maybe the best movement of people is land use and housing planning together. Maybe the best movement is toll lanes. Maybe it's buses or trains. But that's the type of thing I think about. So worrying less about what it is and what the outcome is. And with that, I'll close on, I agree with what George said too. I like this idea that we should be focusing on the outcome. The emissions are the important piece. We shouldn't have these purchase mandates, no matter how good they sound at the beginning. We should really focus on the outcome. Let's not get focused on the solution. Let's get focused on the outcome. And I think if we define the problem properly, we look at what the outcome is, then we have the brains, we have the expertise, we have the technology to figure out the best way to get there. And I think we lose sight of that a little bit.
Thanks, Daryl. George.
And that's what worries me. And it really is in the political debate today, and it's on both sides of the spectrum. And that is the debate between science and ideology, between between facts and beliefs. And the thing about science and facts is it remains true whether you believe it or not. It's because it is. Okay? And I am concerned about this focus on ideology and a belief system that doesn't necessarily result in the outcomes that we think it should. We did an analysis of the VW settlement, which is about $1 billion. It was a result of the violation of the air emissions requirements in automobiles related to pollution. And the fine was administered by ARB. About 85% of the dollars related to that fine went to electric vehicle technology, hydrogen fuel cell and electricity oriented. And about 15% went to natural gas, mostly purchases of this 90% cleaner engine. And the emissions analysis shows that 15% expenditure got you 65% of the emission reductions. And 85% of the expenditure got you a very small share of reductions. And that really tells you that we need to focus on what gets us the most emission reductions. And if I'm like Phil, and I'm worried about 1.4 million people, and I'm worried about air pollution and climate change and emissions, then I've got to spend my money, prudently and responsibly, so that I can move those people and continue to move more people as time goes on, and address the 10-year challenge of climate change and the 3-year challenge, because we have a 2023 deadline, or 5-year challenge, 2023 deadline on NOx. So to me, that's what keeps me up. And it's nice to hear the transit operators say that keeps them up too, and they're concerned about that. I know it doesn't keep you up, Phil, but you did express concern. But what worries me is that the board members are making ideological decisions and essentially not looking at facts. And that's very concerning in public policy making today.
Good. Chris? Couple comments, and then we'll turn it over to Hassan for his
swan
wisdom.
Song. This isn't so much it keeps me up, but inspired by something I'd heard Phil talk about in other venues about the workforce development and the transportation workforce that we need for the future, is how do we position this region and this state on a going forward basis to be the center of innovation? So much of the innovation in this sector is going on here. And you see headlines, GM and Volvo and others are looking at phasing out the internal combustion engine and sea change on the horizon in the transportation sector. But one of the biggest electric car manufacturers in the world, or at least the best known, is in California, in Northern California, Tesla. Two of the most prominent electric bus manufacturers are in LA County. How do we capitalize the Cummins Westport engine that George likes to talk about, a lot of the research done at UC Riverside? How do we get to a place where we're capitalizing and synergizing, I don't usually like to use that word, but taking advantage of the connections between all of this research and development and developing the workforce, so that while we're marching forward towards this seismic shift in our transportation infrastructure, our fueling infrastructure in the whole sector, that we're able to take advantage of it so that we can take economic advantage of it for the good of the people who can manufacture buses, who can work in all of these industries, so that we are staying at the forefront economically as well as in other areas. So I think there's a huge opportunity that we have to combine all of these separate threads into making Southern California a world leader in transportation infrastructure planning and execution.
Thanks, Chris. Hassan?
What kept me up last night is wondering whether the Dodgers going to do it today or tomorrow. What do you think, Phil? He's a Dodgers fan. He doesn't want to admit it, but
I'm a Dodger fan.
okay.
All right.
Those
Rockies aren't happy about that.
I think both all the panelists, but Darrell and Phil mentioned something about the future workforce, or are we training enough to take over? And I will tell you, with progress come challenges, and if we don't meet them, we're going to all lose. Can we keep our kids living here in Southern California? Can we, and right now, given the housing challenge that we're facing, the multiple pronged approaches to housing, LA Times call our homelessness a national disgrace. These kind of things make me think. The statistics about poverty in the greatest nation on earth. Can we have the future workforce and keep them housed here and coordinate that housing with transportation is something I think about. I want to close by thanking all of you, first of all, for the tremendous honor that you gave me in the last 10 years to work with you, and thank my colleagues for the nice comments. I did not know this is happening at all. But it has been the greatest honor of my life to work with such distinguished people, to serve the SCAG region. Equally looking forward to going to San Diego and try my best to serve their region. But it has been an honor that I will cherish forever and ever, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your attention, and please give our panelists another round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you to our moderator and panelists for tackling the tough issue of improving air quality while keeping Southern California moving. Now for the long-awaited moment. I'm not talking about the Disney Twilight tickets. Those won't be available until next year. Actually, just kidding. Our top raffle prize, thanks to the generosity of Nossaman, is a 4-pack of Disney theme park tickets good to use in Anaheim, along with some cool Disney goodies. So everyone, please take out your raffle tickets and listen carefully as I read out the winning numbers for all of the great prizes. Now, you do have to be present to win, so if we call a number and nobody claims it, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next ticket. So for our first prize, we have a $100 Target gift card from M&S Engineers, Amazon Echo Show from T.Y. Lin International, Samsung Gear Icon X earbuds from Nino and more, and a RTIC cooler from Aztec Engineering for a total value of $500. And the winner is 5114691. If you have that ticket, stand up and we will bring the prize to you. Again, that's 5114691. Anybody out there? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. Thank you. Okay, here we go. 5114628. 5114628. Did I see a hand back there? Okay, great. Go ahead and stand up and we're going to bring that prize to you. Okay, for our second prize, we have a $100 Nordstrom gift card from Katz & Associates, a $100 Amazon gift card from Rincon Consultants, and a bottle of Chateau Montelena Napa Valley Petite Syrah Magnum from Towel for a value of over $300. And the winner is 5114068. 5114068. We've got a winner. Okay, great. Congratulations. Our third prize includes a $150 Amazon gift card from Moffett and Nickel, a $100 Nordstrom gift card from Ariano and Associates, and an 8-inch Amazon Fire HD from First Class Connections for a total value of $350. And the winner is 5113976. 5113976. Do I have a winner out there? Okay, great. Excellent. Our next prize includes 10 sweet tickets to the Staples Center from Arup, a sports gift basket from VSCE, and a $100 gift card from eCorp. Let's go ahead and spin that drum. Thank you. Okay, and the winner is 5113957. 511-3957. No one has that ticket? Okay, we're going to move along to the next one. 511-4582. Do we have 4582 out there? 511-4582. Did I see a hand? We do have one? We have a winner. Okay, excellent. And last but not least, our final and most talked about prize this afternoon includes 4 one-day Disneyland theme park tickets and a gift basket valued at over $550 from Nossaman. And the winner of our final prize is, if they're still here, 511-4024. 511-4024. No one has that one? Okay, we're going to go to the next one. This is almost as exciting as the Mega Millions drawing tonight, right? Better chances of winning here. Okay, here we go. 511-4492. All right, we have a winner for our grand prize. Congratulations, everybody. You know, it's really been a wonderful day here at Mobility 21. Let's give a round of applause to all of our speakers today. You know, and I heard some great feedback about the staff here at the JW Marriott who helped us out with lunch. Let's go ahead and give them a round of applause as well. And we'd like to thank all of our sponsors for their tremendous support. Thank you to our elected leaders for championing transportation. Thank you to the Mobility 21 Board of Directors and the planning team for hosting another successful summit. And to all of our members, you are the reason why our coalition is so strong, cohesive, and a force to be reckoned with. Now, please join the Mobility 21 Board of Directors and conference guests for refreshments in the foyer hosted by underwriting titanium sponsor Moffitt & Nickel. Also, be sure to mark your calendars for our next summit. It's going to take place at the Disneyland Hotel again in Anaheim, Friday, September 27th, 2019. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.